Welcome back to Legitimate Targets, everybody. I hope you're all having a great day. Look, there's a lot going on in Europe right now. We have the obvious cancellation of elections in Romania and the persecution of individuals like Călin Georgescu. You have some mysterious deaths that plagued North Rhine-Westphalia in Germany from the AfD party right before the elections took place there. And now in Moldova, a very important country for the broader geopolitical context of Russia and NATO, you have the cancellation of democracy and sovereignty by the established government. So joining me on today's episode to discuss all of this is Victoria Fortuna, a Moldovan politician and the leader of the Greater Moldova Party. She ran for president, and her party was just canceled in the elections that took place last week. Like so many others that were fighting for Moldova's sovereignty, they were accused of being, Russian puppets, something to that effect, just like we saw in Romania. And I wanted to bring on Miss Fortuna to talk about this and to talk about just how bad the corruption and the voter fraud is in Moldova. So, Ms. Fortuna, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you doing?
Good afternoon. In Moldova, it can be said that there is no democracy. What we have is dictatorship, dressed up as democracy. But speaking on behalf of Victoria Fortuna as leader, I am confident that we are stronger than ever today and have once again shown that a conservative party that cares about the people and about Moldova poses a particular threat to the current government and to the globalists in Brussels. But for the people, this is exactly what is needed for the development, independence and sovereignty of the country. In that regard, I am quite well, thank you. The whole team will keep fighting to the bitter end.
To begin with, I want to ask you, for those who might not be aware, and myself, I hope to learn more about the importance of Moldova and Transnistria or Transnistria as another puppet that NATO is trying to use against Russia. What is the importance of Moldova in the geopolitical question between these great powers?
Let's put it this way. Moldova has historically been situated between two great powers, but the real problem lies not only in the NATO-Russia confrontation, but in the fact that the leadership in Chisinau lacks a clear vision and does not have the power to defend national interests. Transnistria has been a frozen conflict for more than 30 years, and the current leadership only pretends to be concerned, using the situation as an electoral pretext. Instead of turning neutrality into a shield and building bridges for dialogue, the government is content to play the role of an observer, an executor of foreign agendas. This strategic impotence turns Moldova from a player into a pawn on the map of the great powers. The authorities have done nothing to prevent this region from becoming a base for either NATO or Russia. What should the future government do? First, it must reintegrate Transnistria and grant it a neutrality, so that it cannot be used in the future by anyone, whether NATO or Russia, to bring war to our doorstep.
So I'd imagine that's what your party and others were fighting for sovereignty for your people. And as I understand, just for that, your party and others were targeted and barred from participating in the elections just days before the voting took place. So, number one, what was the purpose of doing this? What did they say was the purpose of doing this, of barring your parties? And what do you think the outcome has been? I mean, you had Sandu's party win with 50.2% of the vote, just barely with a majority. Do you think that would have been an impossibility had your parties been able to, participate fully and freely in the elections?
Let's put it this way. What they did to the Moldova Mare Party... The Moldova Mare Party is writing history, the new history of the Republic of Moldova. Of course, we're not the only party that has been excluded. There was also the Heart of Moldova Party, when the authorities referred to a court decision to suspend the party's activities for 12 months due to allegations of illegal party financing. The problem is that the decision was not final and binding, but the CEC, which is the Central Electoral Commission, forced the electoral bloc, which included party members, mind you, to exclude them from the lists. Such a procedure raises serious doubts about the legality and the democratic nature of the election process. There is a clear violation of the Constitution and international standards for free and fair elections. But what happened in the case of the Moldova Mare Party, of which I am the leader, was systematic oppression. The party was excluded from the electoral race several times due to arbitrary decisions of the Electoral Commission without any official notification or the possibility of a quick appeal. And each time, the Supreme Court returned us to the race. The most egregious situation occurred on election day, when it became clear that voters were overwhelmingly casting their ballots for the conservative Moldova Mare Party. A few hours before the polls were closed, the Central Electoral Commission effectively excluded the party, which, in my opinion, is a clear violation of the right of citizens to free expression of will and the principles of equality of parties, based on a court decision issued on an emergency basis on the same day, the day of the election. These actions violate the Constitution of the Republic of Moldova, the right to political participation, free elections, the law on parliamentary and local elections, and even international standards for free elections, such as the European Convention on Human Rights, the right to participation and equal representation. Not to mention that the citizens' right to vote, expressed en masse in favor of the party, was effectively stolen. They simply excluded us on the last day, 3 hours before the end of the election race. In response to this violation, I have submitted an official appeal to the UN and the Council of Europe, asking them to include the architects of the usurpation of democracy and the rule of law in Moldova on the lists of international sanctions. This is a necessary step to hold accountable those who undermine political freedom and the fundamental rights of citizens. But I can tell you that in the future, all these actions will be considered a criminal case of usurpation of state power. And all these people who were involved, starting with the president, then on with the prime minister, the Ministry of Internal Affairs, the SIB, which is the Information and Security Service of Moldova, as well as other accomplices, shall be held accountable because they stole the voice of the people. They realized that the Moldova Mare Party is supported by the people, and that it could be so successful that the current party would not even get 10%, let alone 25%, of votes. Because all they have done for the state is to destroy the economy, lose the country's sovereignty, and lose strategic locations. And the worst thing is that between 2000 and 2025, 600,000 citizens of the Republic of Moldova left the country. Fearing that the Moldova Mare Party would win with a majority, they fought us throughout this period, but on the last day, in violation of all national and international legislation, they simply excluded us from the race through a single court ruling.
Some opposition parties, and actually some of the documents that I've seen from exit polling stations, identify that the PAS party, Sandu's party, actually lost the elections. What do you make of those claims? And I guess, what do you make of the evidence that's been presented from these exit polling stations? And also, what is, in your eyes, the true level of popular support for Sandu's party amongst the Moldovan public?
Yes, there is ample evidence that the official results were rigged. The authorities used uncontrollable, unconstitutional mechanisms to ensure their victory. We all know that they used postal voting, which is a tool that is notoriously difficult to properly monitor, used without proper oversight, and is contrary to the Constitution and electoral principles. In addition, violations were found in the voter lists, which included deceased citizens, and some who voted in person in Moldova were later listed as having voted from abroad, not to mention the censorship and control of the media during the period. There was mass persecution, intimidation, detention of opinion makers, pressure on elderly citizens not to go to the polls, manipulation of ballots and ballot boxes in favor of the current government as well. There were even cases where ballot boxes were filled to the brim with ballots as early as 7:30 in the morning. All these mechanisms turned the pilot project of postal voting into an experiment in the effectiveness of election fraud, testing the possibilities of its use in the future. But everything I have just described helped the current government to achieve those 50.03%. To be honest, the ruling party's approval rating is, at best, around 10%. Because no one, absolutely no one, even those who previously supported PASS, now understand that this party is leading our country's future, its development, its independence, its sovereignty, and most importantly, its neutrality to disaster. Because the PASS government is doing everything possible to make us lose these three elements of statehood. They want to drag us into war. Therefore, I can say with competent and complete confidence that the current government has done everything possible to rig these elections. I therefore call on the opposition parties that have entered parliament to renounce their mandates and demand new elections. Because if they accept these mandates, they will legalize the falsification of the elections by the PASS, as well as by representatives of international interests such as Brussels or Soros foundations. But note that none of this was done in the interests of Moldovans themselves. If the opposition agrees to the current situation and accepts the status quo, it will spend the next 4 years in parliament as a mere decoration.
I've seen accounts from several American citizens, U.S. citizens, who were barred from participating, simply voting in these elections as dual citizens of Moldova. Do you think that this is a result of the recent shift in bilateral relations between Moldova and the United States after the election victory of Donald Trump and the cutting off of assistance to Moldova via USAID?
I believe that shutting down US aid in the Republic of Moldova was an excellent decision. In the future, we should foreclose all international NGOs that influence the foreign policy of countries, turning their sovereignty into a tool for Brussels, Soros, and other globalists, whose goal is to completely destroy our statehood and take away our neutrality and independence. Yes, I also saw that people were prevented from voting, not only in the United States, but also in Transnistria and Russia. This is a clear violation of the rights of the citizens of the Republic of Moldova, the violation of their constitutional right to choose one political party or the other. As I've already said, the current government took this step to exclude citizens who are inconvenient for them and who oppose current policies. Judge for yourselves. Depriving citizens in Transnistria, the Russian Federation, and even the United States of the opportunity to vote, and not allowing persons with dual citizenship to vote. Such is a clear and gross violation of the right to participate in the elections, enshrined in the Constitution of Moldova, which guarantees equal participation for all citizens without geographical or political discrimination. The authorities have thus attempted to restrict the will of those deemed inconvenient and ensure their own outcome. But I now call on all citizens of the Republic of Moldova, regardless of where they are right now, in the United States of America, in Russia, or in Transnistria. I call on them to defend their rights by filing complaints with the Central Election Commission, documenting unequal access to polling stations, and appealing to the Constitutional Court and drawing the attention of international organizations to this problem. Why am I calling on citizens? Because they must show that their right to vote has been violated. Citizens must understand that their expression of will is under attack, but there are specific ways to defend their right to vote. A mass response is what the Republic of Moldova needs. It needs for people to come out and openly say that their rights have been violated. This is the only way to stop such abuses and protect the sovereignty of elections. But I will tell you one thing. The Moldova Mare Party has insisted, is insisting, and will continue to insist that no government should be able to use this tool of fraud, which is postal voting. Amendments must be made to the election law so that only Moldovan citizens within the country have the right to vote. This will prevent any attempts at external or uncontrollable postal interference. Citizens of the Republic of Moldova have the right to vote under the Constitution, but they should have to return to their homeland to do that. Then we'll see whether the elections are being rigged or not. because within Moldova, this process can be controlled and verified, but the Republic's embassies in other countries are not able to cope with this.
One thing that stood out to me was on the day of voting, you had President Sandu come out and say, we might have to annul the results of these elections. She was very, very worried that her party might not come out on top, and she was indicating that they might have to do this. I'd ask you, what do you think they could have done to annul the elections? Do you think it could have been like what they did in Romania? And also, do you think that Telegram founder Pavel Durov's comments surrounding the obvious interference by French authorities, by Macron himself, maybe worried President Sandu that an increasing number of Moldovans would choose not to support her party in these parliamentary elections?
Let's just say that they knew from the get-go that their pilot project on election rigging would be successful. As I said earlier, they did everything possible: postal voting, fraud in embassies, stuffing ballot boxes with pre-filled ballots. They were confident of the outcome of these elections, but pretended to be a democratic country whose legitimate and fair elections were being interfered with by someone from outside. To understand who, in the opinion of the authorities, this someone from outside was, we need to remember what is going on in Maya Sandu's head. She clearly follows the rhetoric of Brussels, and thus, in her opinion, only the Russian Federation can interfere in the elections in Moldova, and that is through fraud and financing of the opposition. Let me remind you that Maya Sandu has also said that, God forbid the current government does not win, otherwise we'll be dragged into war. I sincerely do not understand these words. They are pure intimidation. But they seem to have had some effect on citizens, albeit not a very strong one. The authorities knew they would win these elections, particularly because the whole process had huge support from the European Union. We all saw how independent, objective observers were being excluded from polling stations. They could not observe. Therefore, I do not think, and I do not advise you to think, that they had any doubts about the success of the rigging of these elections. As for Pavel Durov's words about the intervention of the French special services, their order to shut down Telegram channels, I would love to look at the situation on a larger scale. You see, the process of so-called integration into the European Union has clearly shown that not only Moldova, but all EU member states are losing their sovereignty and independence. The elections in Moldova were rigged on a large scale thanks to the intervention of Brussels. It was they, the foreign services and member states of the European Union, who made decisions about the fate of our people, and no one paid any attention to the will of the people themselves. When foreign services demanded the removal of Telegram channels critical of the government and the past did not respond, it became clear that we were dealing with a fact of usurpation of power in the state, outright theft of citizens' votes, and betrayal of national sovereignty through Brussels' interference in Moldova's internal politics. Fortunately, they underestimated our country. Moldova is not a platform for foreign interests. Every citizen has the right to vote. The authorities must respect said vote, and the organizers of such abuses of power must be held accountable both internationally and in criminal proceedings within the country. Because if we do not stop the pilot project of election rigging, of Brussels' interference in the internal politics of the state, then in the future, I assure you that we will not only lose our sovereignty, because we already lost it the moment we allowed Brussels to influence our domestic political decisions, but we will also lose our independence, neutrality and statehood. I'm telling you once again that I have submitted an appeal to the UN and the Council of Europe to impose sanctions on the architects of the usurpation of democracy and the rule of law within the Republic of Moldova. Because I want them to understand that the Moldova Mare Party and the citizens of the Republic of Moldova will fight back, and our people will not fall victim to the manipulation to which the Moldovan country is being subjected.
Based on all the evidence I've seen and I've heard from you just now, this is the clearest example that I've seen of the globalists stealing an election outright. they mobilized everyone they could think of, even, as you mentioned, Pavel Durov trying to mobilize Telegram to shut down fair and free elections here in Moldova. And it makes me very worried for what comes next for Moldovans. Two things that immediately come to mind are whether or not now the Sandu government will attempt to prosecute those who are fighting for sovereignty in Moldova, like we saw with Romanian authorities against Călin Georgescu. So do you think that it's safe for you and your fellow comrades in Moldova still? And also the question of Transnistria. Do you think it's safe for the people of Transnistria? Do you think that Moldova is going to try to do something as insane as occupy Transnistria and try to strip them of any sort of bit of sovereignty that they still have?
Given the current situation in the Republic of Moldova, there is a very high probability that our country will be absorbed by another. There are now open talks of the possibility of Moldova being absorbed by Romania, as well as the Transnistria region being handed over to Ukraine. But based on the rhetoric we hear every day on television, I believe that the current party will do everything possible to ensure that some kind of conflict remains within Transnistria. It is not so much about the capabilities of the ruling party as it is about the level of intervention by NATO resources currently located within the country. We fear that if the opposition parties that have entered parliament do not give up their seats, the current government will drag us into the Ukrainian conflict. There are already rumors about plans to use Transnistria in order to open a second front, so to say. Brussels, of course, will blame Russia for everything. That it is Russia, which, in my opinion, has no business in the Republic of Moldova, that will unleash the conflict in Transnistria. Therefore, we, the Moldova Mare Party, will continue to fight to involve international organizations and ensure that the current party is under constant surveillance. We will inform citizens so that they understand the current reality, and we will do everything possible, everything in our hands, to ensure that international organizations do not allow the Republic of Moldova to be drawn into a major conflict against a great power, as has happened with Ukraine. We consider it our duty not to allow Moldova to be turned into a battleground where world powers and great powers resolve their differences. As I said earlier, the first thing the ruling party must do is to draw up a program for the reintegration of Transnistria into the Republic of Moldova and grant it neutral status, so that neither Russian nor any other special services are stationed there. This region must not become a springboard for foreign interests.
Victoria Fortuna, thank you so much for joining me, and I wish nothing but the best for Moldovans in the future. It's a very tough time for all of Europe right now. So I hope that you all find your voice and are allowed to speak freely in the near future, but that day is not today. And I keep up the good fight and stay safe, because it is very dangerous there.
I would like to express my sincere gratitude to you and underline one crucial point. The Moldova Mare Party is neither pro-European nor pro-Russian. It is a party that fights for the interests of the Republic of Moldova, for the interests of Moldovans, for the interests of a great and prosperous country. The Moldova Mare Party will continue to fight for its people. When you asked me earlier if I or our team were afraid of what the current party might do against us, I will say this. We feel that the people are with us, and that God is with us. And when God clears the path for you, there is nothing to fear. I assure you, the current government will not be around for long. I hope that the current Europe's globalist position will soon disappear, and that every country, whether a member of the EU or not, will understand the most crucial thing. If a country has lost its sovereignty, its independence, its moral values and faith in God, then that country has lost its right to exist. Let me conclude by saying this. God is with us, and we will continue to fight. And I assure you that our people will prevail. Not the past party, not this minority in charge, but the people, together with Moldova Mare, will prevail.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.